Okay, the next thing you guys are going to do is you guys are going to do the timeline challenge, which is located in your packets that you had to complete for the Chapter 4 assessment. It is all the way in the back, and it should be 2 pages in length. And it starts right here. You can see at the top where it says timeline challenge. Now, what you're going to do in order to complete this timeline challenge is you're going to log into your online textbook. Okay? Once you get to your online textbook, you're going to go to Chapter 4, the chapter we just completed, and then you're going to go to Timeline Challenge, which is all the way down at the bottom of the sections. Okay, you click on that, and the Timeline Challenge has kind of a little chronological order with pictures and little descriptions on them. Now, this is extremely hard to see right now, but you can click it, and then you can obviously have the zoom in there. If that feature is not working, I would please advise you to grab a textbook, and those can be found either underneath your desk or in the parking lot 8 cabinet on the side of the room. Okay, we have to make sure we're using this timeline. Now, to give you a little perspective of why we're doing this, we don't talk about dates very much because I'll never have you guys memorize a specific date, but it is important to understand when things happen in order to see the cause and effect relationship between them. So this is kind of the overall unit of the first 4 chapters and what we've learned so far this year. We're going to kind of put this in almost a chronological order timeline so we can better understand why Americans gained their independence and why we actually start the American Revolution, which we will learn in the next unit. Okay? So you'll be looking at this timeline for the entirety of this activity. Now, when we see the first question here, the first part is going to be questions 1 through 10. Okay? This is the first part right here that I'm highlighting. Okay? This part is all going to be found in your timeline. Right here, if you go to your online textbook, this will be found. For example, the first question about when did the first Americans reach the Americas? How did they get there? Okay, so there's 2 parts of this question. You have to answer both. So if we go back to our timeline, we can see that here in the red is going to give us our answer. Okay, you are going to write that answer right here below number 1. All of the answers through the highlighted questions that you see right here will be found exactly in that timeline. Okay, you guys, I just want you to get in there. I want you to see the dates of when things occurred and how that may have caused some other things to occur. Okay? Now the next part of the timeline challenge is the critical thinking part. And this is probably the hardest part. This has 11, 12, 13, and 14. These are the questions that you have to answer. So you have to answer 4 questions critically thinking. Now what you may have to do when you're answering the critical thinking part is you may have to go back, necessarily, yes, look at the timeline, but those answers may not necessarily be right there because you're going to have to use some of your knowledge from what we have learned so far this year. So that may entail going back and looking at Chapter 1, the first Americans. Remember when we did our preview unit? Okay, in order to answer number 11, you may have to go back to Chapter 1 and get some examples of how the environment influenced the cultures of American Indian groups. Okay, you can find 2 examples of that in Chapter 1. Okay, the next one. How would you, would you have preferred to live in Jamestown, Providence, or Pennsylvania? Give at least 2 reasons for your answer. This is going to be found in the section that we did, the chapter that we did on English colonies in North America. Okay, you are going to decide from that chapter which area you would have liked to live in the most, and you have to give 2 legitimate answers to why you would want to live in that area. Okay, for number 13, you will find that in Chapter 4, which we went over, obviously, just this last unit here, Life in the Colonies. You're going to describe how the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights influenced colonists' view of the government. You may know that from your notes and that sort of thing, but it's going to be super important to go back into chapter 4 and actually look for the specific answer there. Now, it may not be just bam right there in the text. Okay, you may have to come to some conclusions, and you may have to use your knowledge in order to come up with your own answer. It may not be found exactly in the text. Okay, the last one is probably going to be the hardest one for you. Okay, number 14. If you could add 3 more events to this timeline, which would they be? List each event and explain why you think it is important enough to add it into the timeline. This can be anything that you find in chapters 1, 2, 3, or 4 that you want to add to the timeline. And they must be significant events. So you have to kind of go back into the timeline and see maybe what events are not there. So if we go back in the timeline, we can see that it only has a certain number of events. Obviously, more things happen in history besides these features right here. So we have to go back into the chapters and we have to find at least 3 different events that we would want to add. And we have to list why specifically they are important. That is the thing that I want you to focus on the most. Listing why you think they're important enough to add to the timeline. Okay, you need that. Now, this timeline challenge is going to be worth 10 points. And it does go into an assessment grade. Okay, we do this after each unit. So about after every 4 chapters, we're going to do a timeline challenge. And the history teachers in 7th grade have come to the conclusion that this is really good learning for you guys, and it really sets up certain things that are going to happen in history, which we will learn about very soon. So that's why we put such a big importance on this timeline challenge, and we make it worth 10 points as an assessment grade. So that means that this is going to be worth as much as your Chapter 3 assessment. Okay, so please take this seriously. Answer everything with the correct capitalization and punctuation. This is going to be turned into Mr. Hunter for a grade. So please make sure that you are taking your time on this and doing this to the best of your ability. Do not worry about finishing today. You will have time Wednesday in class to finish this as well. I want you guys to make sure you're taking very ample time on this and making sure you're doing it correctly.